we are not going to say, I object to the moral standards of the individual, so he is not receiving inherent rights.
It's not about moral standards. It's not at all about moral standards. It's about he's been taking Russian money.
So what?
But I mean, doesn't there have to be a trial before you can even say that? Like, has he been taking Russian money? Who's he
so
been
what?
taking
I don't
from?
care. I don't care. I don't care if Vladimir Putin personally handed him a gold bar. The fact is, you cannot have a country if your government explicitly states we will hold our own to different standards and not charge them, and you will rot in prison.
I think it's farcical to get into high dudgeon over somebody that's been in bed with the Russians.
That has nothing to do with the laws of this nation.
Yeah, I mean, Al Capone went down for tax fraud, not for being a mobster.
Well, I mean, he committed tax fraud.
Okay.
And so we uphold...
That's not how we remember Al Capone.
Sure, but we enforce tax fraud laws against people.
Sure.
And that's the one they were able to catch him on. That's right. Actually, I think actually... What
and we caught Steve Bannon on contempt of Congress.
This is actually a fascinating thing that Capone, we could not prove of the mobster stuff he was doing, and so we did not put him in prison. That's amazing. We couldn't prove it, so we didn't do it. But we could prove the tax fraud stuff, and so we did. Steve, okay, so fair point. Merrick Garland goes to prison next.
I don't see how that follows.
Merrick, we get people on tax fraud, right? We get Merrick Garland on contempt. We get Bannon on contempt. We get Merrick Garland on contempt. That's the way this country works.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to work to throw an attorney general in prison, no.
What does that mean?
I'm afraid not. Do you think it would be good to set a precedent where we're throwing our attorneys general in prison?
Do you think it's a good idea to prosecute the president, impeach him twice after the...
No.
I actually think...
We do all kinds of things that are terrible.
The greatest precedent ever, one of the greatest things ever done in this country would be to say, you do not violate the subpoenas from Congress. And if you are referred, the DOJ cannot intervene and say, we won't actually enforce the law. If we're to put Merrick Garland in prison, that would be a strong statement that no one is above the law.
Okay.
Well, he clearly broke the law. That's a fact. That's not in dispute.
Look, the executive branch has been standing up to congressional subpoenas for like decades. If that's a situation you want to end, you're not going to end it with a four-seat majority. Let's just be realistic about this.
That's also, again, not the point. As I already stated, many people don't expect the vote to actually succeed. But that's a different point. And that's the point where I made is...
Well, why are you setting these expectations for something that's not going to happen?
That has nothing to do with the principle of how a country will function and the fact basis of what happens to a country that doesn't abide by these standards.
Okay. That's
why I said, if they do not vote in favor of inherent contempt, your country doesn't exist. It's a facade.
So this is about telling Republicans how to vote on this one.
This is about maintaining the fabric of a country based on the standards set by law enforcement and the co-equal branches of government that have been acting in complete violation of the Constitution for decades. And we're on the verge of the fabric shredding into a million pieces. Where we are now.
I mean, are you going to cross the Rubicon with this Caesar and this army? I mean,
no, the Rubicon was crossed.
Yeah, it was already
with the arrest of Peter Navarro.
Okay.
And the charges against Steve Bannon. The Rubicon was crossed by accusing Donald Trump of being a traitor to his country falsely and impeaching him over what Joe Biden was actually doing in Ukraine. The Rubicon was crossed a long time ago. And now the issue is, how do we prevent total decay and chaos and disorder?
Clearly not this way.
This is the only way.
No, it's not.
Yeah, see, if you're approaching this from, we hereby publicly declare that Democrats can break the law, but Peter Navarro goes to prison for it, then here's what happens. So let's go back to Blackstone's formulation, a very rudimentary element of American constitutional, I would say the Constitution of the American people, that is what constitutes the American people. The reason why the United States holds its views on, say, the First, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth Amendment is that Blackstone, you can go back to England, it is better that 10 guilty persons go free than one innocent person suffer.
Sure.
The reason for this, as articulated very well by the Founding Fathers, was that if a nation comes to believe that if you, as an innocent person, you will be prosecuted and persecuted regardless, then the incentive of the public is to defy population and government and act in accordance of only themselves.
Well, look, I think Peter Navarro's gotten a bad rap. I'm not so sure about Steve Bannon, but, you know, if you lie down with dogs, you wake up with fleas.
Neither here nor there.
Okay.
Like, you keep making these personal arguments like, I personally don't like Bannon, therefore this is just.
It's not about that. It's about you when you're dealing with mobsters, you use the knife at hand.
So the issue then becomes, and this is why the founding fathers opposed this, and Benjamin Franklin said it is better, Blackstone was wrong, he said it is better that 100 guilty persons go free than one innocent suffer, which is to state that even if Bannon is a mobster, you do not use the law incongruously to lock him up. Why?
It hasn't been used incongruously.
So
you're trying
Merrick
to create
Garland,
a double standard.
Merrick Garland defied a subpoena.
The double standard
was referred for criminal prosecution, and they said no.
That's an ex post facto thing. That you're creating the double standard with what's going on right now. The double standard didn't exist until Anna Paulina Luna decided to create it.
What double standard?
What you just said. The case you've been
the double standard was when the DOJ said we won't prosecute Merrick Garland.
Right.
Okay, and now the response is we have no choice but to enforce our legislative authority, which is the next step would be inherent contempt.
Okay.
If we live in a country where the people of this nation are looking to the highest level, the executive branch, and the DOJ says explicitly we are above the law, we get exactly what the founding fathers feared. You will see small communities fracture off from confidence in the government, start acting within their own accordance in defiance of federal law, and it will exacerbate more than it already has to this point. The only remedy would be if Peter Navarro is going to jail, if Bannon's going to jail, Merrick Garland has to answer in the exact same way. Otherwise, the last semblance of any kind of cohesion in this country is ripped to shreds. And it is at the DOJ level, the highest level, we are hearing them say explicitly, we will charge your candidate, the frontrunner for the presidency. Under the same law, we will not charge the current president, Joe Biden. There's a question of immunity that only applies to Trump and not to Joe Biden. The DOJ will absolutely ignore contempt of Congress targeting our political party, but yours we will go at with full force. And this is what precipitates social disorder, chaos, and eventual fracturing like the Soviet Union. You have to have the American people, the people of a nation must believe the government is functioning. And right now, if they don't do this, then the word is out. Your government doesn't exist.
Prima facie, I don't buy the argument that America falls if we don't prosecute the chief law enforcement officer. Think about what you're saying.
Yeah.
Think about that. I mean, it's like upside down world.
Pretty sure I thought about it quite intently and then expressed myself for 20 minutes already on the issue.
Can I raise a question just for both of you to consider? So yesterday, the House said that they were considering holding in contempt the biographer of Biden who's written these memoirs, and he's refused to comply with the subpoena, asking him to turn over documents and audio recordings and things like that. How does that compare for you? You know, you're saying the chief law enforcement officer versus this biographer who's refusing to comply with subpoena. Is one better than the other, or are they both ridiculous? What's the take here?
I think in general, congressional subpoenas should be respected. It's a little bit different when you're dealing with the sitting attorney general. I think
because some people are above the law, right? Yes or no?
There are real separation of powers issues, and like what is being asked for is like basically investigative documents. I mean,
Can you articulate the separation of powers you're concerned with? Can you just lay out the idea that you're actually concerned with?
Do you want Congress getting involved in the investigation of criminal?
No, I didn't ask you to ask me a question. What are your thoughts on it? Like,
we do not want Congress to get involved with the investigation. I mean, if Congress gets involved in the investigation of like more or less ordinary crime, though this is admittedly extraordinary crime, that's a road we don't. There's a reason why we have an attorney general. You're starting to go down the road where we actually don't believe in attorneys general in the first place.
If a president commits a crime, who investigates him? His own DOJ?
Typically, I mean, this is kind of what impeachment is for, right? High crimes and misdemeanors.
Okay, well, how do you begin the process of high crimes and misdemeanors without an investigation? Should Congress then investigate?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens when Congress says, give us the documents, and they say no?
Yeah, I mean, this is a strange hypothetical.
There's literally no hypothetical here right now. Presidents have committed crimes, and the process is their co-equal branches investigate them. That's why they have these powers in the
We
first
don't know
place.
that the president's committed a crime.
Well, you need an investigation first, right? Who investigates? The DOJ? Well, no, that's the branch we're concerned with. So you would need a co-equal branch to perform a check and balance on the other branch, which would be...
I mean, should we get a special prosecutor or something like that?
Well, but it would be Congress. Congress initiates impeachment inquiries all the time. So if you'd like to initiate an impeachment inquiry, you're going to need preponderance of evidence. Okay, well, Joe Biden committed a crime. That's not in dispute. We know for a fact that he did. Those documents he had in his house is a violation of the law. They did not prosecute. We are now aware of a high crime or misdemeanor, and we would like evidence, preponderance of evidence, to launch an inquiry and a formal impeachment. That's what Congress does. It's why Congress has these powers. If a branch of government is acting in defiance of the law, and what the DOJ is not going to investigate itself. No, Congress does that. And then Congress requested the evidence. The Attorney General rejected this, refused to do it. They're not holding anyone accountable. The order of operations then is, yeah, here we go. Inherent contempt. The Sergeant at Arms of Congress is going to be the one who has to take enforcement action.
So
this is all standard order of operations, in my opinion.
it's not standard order of operations to have the House Sergeant of Arms arrest the Attorney General.
But it is.
It's not. Well, it's in there, but it hasn't happened in 90 years.
So Biden committed a crime. That's a fact, right?
No, it's not.
He didn't have classified documents?
The purpose of a trial is to determine if somebody
Did Joe Biden have classified documents?
A lot of politicians have had classified
Why can't you answer the
documents.
question? Did he have the documents? Yes or no?
Yeah, he did.
Is that illegal?
I mean, so did Trump.
Sure. And he's being charged for it.
Yeah.
So is it illegal?
Yeah, of course it's illegal.
So Biden committed crimes.
I mean, I totally get what you're saying about all the double standards when it comes to the overclassification of things. But what you're talking about is going forward with this crazy triple bank shot that isn't going anywhere.
What's a triple bank shot? What does that mean?
Having the House Sergeant at Arms arrest the Attorney General. That's a crazy triple bank
What's your
shot.
remedy for Joe Biden having committed crimes and there being no accountability?
I think in general, this happens so much that overlooking this is not the end of the world.
So overlook
this is
overlook
absurd.
the crimes being committed.
Well, look, are you going to prosecute half the civil servants in Washington?
I mean, I would.
Okay.
No question. Absolutely. Yeah, if I was president, they'd all be in jail.
It's an interesting idea. I mean, if the guy who's pushing for this has been taking a bunch of Russian money for years, does that seem like...
Steve Bannon is not the guy pushing it. I am, and I've not taken any Russian money.
Well, okay. It seems like this is unwise. It seems like this is an imprudent action. That's all I'm saying. Because a party that's standing behind a guy with a long-time relationship with organized crime proposing to arrest the nation's chief law enforcement officer seems like the sort of thing gangsters would do.
Completely meaningless.
It's not meaningless.
So why we have Donald Trump in the first place, why we have Steve Bannon in the first place, is because of people like you. Because we are witness to crimes committed by political elites, corporate
Most of
elites.
my writing has been fairly supportive of Trump.
Sure. And the reason why we have Trump is because of people like you who make the argument that Joe Biden should be allowed to commit crimes, that Merrick Garland
I haven't
should be
made that argument.
Well, you said there should be no enforcement action. You said we shouldn't pursue action to go after a man who's not being charged for crimes.
I mean, this guy, Joe, nobody's talking about Joe Biden like beating up an old woman while she's carrying her groceries. Like
we're talking about standards in law enforcement.
Okay.
And we either have a standard of law enforcement or we don't. And if we as a people do not understand where the line is, there is no line. You get oligarchy and you get Soviet-style collapse. And then you can look at Ukraine and we can look at history to see what happens to nations that do exactly what you're describing.
I think the direction toward Banana Republic kind of begins with arresting chief law enforcement officers.
I think it begins with accusing your president of being a Russian traitor in 2016 or 2015 before he even got elected, and then spending $35 million on a false investigation, continually accusing him and running smears in the press over and over again, only to find out the whole thing was fake.
Yeah, I'm not going to defend Russiagate. You're right about that.
Okay, so now we need some accountability.
Okay, this is probably not the way to get it.
And so far, a Congress has to investigate. The only thing Republicans have been able to muster up in the past several years, while Trump has got his feet stuck in concrete, and he's barely able to get anything done. Mind you, a lot of it was his own fault. He hired a lot of these people. You end up with Republicans getting back Congress and using Congress. In the meantime, when Democrats had Congress and they launched the J6 committee, of which Matt Gaetz has explained was not properly formed, didn't have a proper minority representation on it.
That's fair.
They begin to pull people in, criminally charge them under these ridiculous lies, give up information, leak it to the press. We need accountability. I'm not even asking for anything extrajudicial. I'm not asking for anything over what's already been done. I'm asking for equal standard of the law to be applied. if we don't have that, the American people will disregard the rule of law in this country. That's what the founding fathers feared. That's why we have the First, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments. That's why we have Blackstone's formulation at the core of how we handle our law in this country.
I mean, look, if you're going to make that argument that there's a different standard for powerful people versus unpowerful people, and I think in a lot of cases that's quite true, how about the recent indictment of Henry Cuellar? He's a Democratic centrist congressman with connections to Onderil, which is a company that's quite right-wing. It's got connections to Peter Thiel, Trey Stevens, the Founders Fund, these sorts of guys. And the congressman who's the chief backer, who's a Democrat, by the way, has recently been indicted. How about all of the indictments of powerful gangsters that have happened over the last year and a half? I mean, this is to me fairly strong indications that things are heading in a positive direction rather than a negative one. So I don't really buy the idea that the sky is falling unless we arrest the attorney general.
Okay, so Peter Navarro's in jail.
Uh-huh.
Steve Bannon's going to jail.
They're pretty short sentences.
Even if it's not,
regardless.
Even if I grant that, or if we say that it's not, the sky isn't falling, and I think you're probably right. Like it isn't like this is going to change the course of history if you do. I still think that the idea that it's beyond the pale to use procedure that exists to try to at least incentivize proper behavior. And that's part of the reason why we have law enforcement for regular people, right? You have cops on the beat because you want to deter crime. If you only have one political party, even if they're the party out of favor, like Donald Trump and his friends, even if you look at them with disfavor and you think that they're corrupt, you can have that opinion and fine. But if you only prosecute them, you shake the country's trust in the institutions at a time when we have already gone through COVID and we went through all of the lawlessness of 2020 and stuff. You got the American people have never had less faith in their government. They're even having a shaking of the faith of the things that we have consistently had generally positive opinions of, the military. So we've got a massive problem in America with people not believing in our institutions. And as long as our institutions are not handing out justice equally, you're going to only intensify that. So I can understand your perspective about this isn't worth it. I get it. But I do think that just to blow it off and to say that it's not worth the effort, not worth talking about, are too crazy. At some point, the American people are going to say, look, it's always one-sided. The gun's always pointing one way. And that only leads to more people.
I agree with everything you just said. But
we know what happens after this. You look at any country. You look at every country that's gone through this. The Soviet Union collapses. We get the rise of the Ukrainian oligarchs and the Russian oligarchs. You look at the Spanish Civil War. You cannot, as a country, function when one political faction targets the other without any kind of accountability. That's it. This is why you get January 6th. This is why you get Donald Trump in the first place. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.